Yeah. So as always, if you have not tried to solve it yourself, I'll definitely recommend that you do that first before watching me solve the problem. Will give you a practice of reading the problem statements. One thing before we start, that async functions always returns a promise. Okay, so let me quickly show you an example. I'll just go to sources. Here I'll create async function, whatever. Okay, and it returns hello. Now when I invoke async function, for example, so I am invoking the function, and if I run the program, we can see that it returns a promise. Even though we returned hello, it returns a promise, and we can see that it's already fulfilled promise, but still it's a promise, right? So we have hello here, but it's a fulfilled promise. So how would we access it? In case we want to log hello, how would we do it? We do it this way. Function dot then, and we'll get back our some data here. We can console.log the data. And since there's just one parameter, we may get rid of this as well. Now if I hit run, so we can see that this line of code, line 6, is giving us hello. Okay, so function, any async function returns a promise. Also, we can consume it using async await if we want to. Basically, it just returns a promise, and we resolve it the way we resolve a promise. So we can do something like this: async, maybe an arrow function, and here we await. So we can store it somewhere. Let data equals to await fun. We'll invoke the fun function. Okay, and then we can console.log our data. And if we save it and execute it, we of course need to invoke it, and we can immediately invoke it like this. And it needs to be an async arrow function. Now if I save and run it from line number 7, I should get hello. Okay, so dot then or async await, whatever can be used. The point to remember is that an async function, even if we are returning a simple value from an async function, it will return a promise. Okay, we can of course return a promise if we want to explicitly. For example, we can return new promise. No, nothing is stopping us from doing that. But even if we are returning a value, it will return a promise. So this is one thing to remember. Yeah, coming back to the problem, the function get 5 to dos should return a promise. Again, since it's an async function, it will always return a promise, so we don't need to worry about that, which resolves to 5 to do items. So let us check what this actually returns. Okay, so here we can see that this thing already returns 5 to do items. Okay, 2 are of user 1, 1 of user 6, 1 of user 8, 1 of user 10. So total 5 to do items. Okay, and then yeah, so that is the only thing, right? And here there are 2 hints. Whatever you return from async function is a promise, and you can take help from this documentation here. Even during evaluations, you are allowed to take help from my notes, javascript.info, or MDN. Okay, so try. It's good to write everything within try catch block. Visual Studio Code can write the template for you as well. So try catch. Okay, and here for console log, I can either return or console log something. I'll just return, in case of any problem, something went wrong while fetching to-dos. Okay, and okay, I need to be sure that I don't override this template in any way, right? So what I'll do is I'll fork it before I do anything here. So I'll just copy this piece of code or cut this piece of code, again save it, and I'll just fork it so that people who will be solving this after my video, they won't be having issues. Problem live solution. Okay, so this is a different one. Yeah, so this get 5 to dos, and here since it's an async await, so we can declare a variable, let response is equal to await fetch, and we can make a fetch request to this URL. Please make sure not to make any changes anywhere, and it should be inside of quotes. So because of await in line number 12, we are sure that when we reach line 13, if everything goes well, we will have a response, right? We don't need to dot then or anything like that. So then we can do let to-dos is equal to await response.json, and finally we can return our to-dos. So now we can check it. So here what I have already written for you is we are invoking this function and using dot then to check if our data is working as expected, and we can see that we got back our 5 to-do item, these 5 to-do items here. Maybe many times in browser or browsers in the Visual Studio Code's terminal, you either may have to do console.dir, or console.log json.stringify. Okay, so capital json.stringify and then the data. So in that way, and of course you will need to format it a little bit, so null and 2, and then you will get the complete data. In case you are in the Visual Studio Code, you are not able to see the data properly, so you can use this trick of json.stringify before sending it to console log. So I'll comment it out again. So this function is working as expected. We are getting back. So this function when invoked, so see this function when invoked returns a promise which resolves to the 5 to-do items. So this function returns a promise which resolves to 5 to-do items. So this one, task 1 seems to be done. Then we have to complete this function. The function get users should return a promise, and it will return a promise because it's an async function. And it should resolve to all 10 users data. Let us check. So if I make URL request to here, I do get back 10 users data. So now it's going to be very similar. So I'll just pause the video and quickly type it out. I'll make sure to comment it, right? So that I don't end up making too many requests, right? So I'll comment it so that I don't end up making too many requests. And now if I save it, I can see that this promise. So when this function is invoked, it gives a promise which resolves to the data of 10 users. So I have the exact 10 users here. So this I have verified. This means that till here, our code is working as expected. Now the most trickiest part is this third number, and I want you to pay very close attention to it. And um, there are lots of things, and we'll do things step by step. So first thing is that this well formatted data should return a promise. So it will return a promise because it's an async function. We don't need to worry about it. That resolves to array of 5 objects. So array of 5 objects for each, it is for each to do item, okay? For each to do item. And each object contains user ID, name of the user, and to do title. So for the to do item, I do have user ID, so that's not an issue. I do have title, that's not an issue, but I need to get user ID. I have ID, I have the title. I have the user ID, I have the title, but there is no way to, we don't see user name here, right? So somehow we have to use the data that we received from here and use the name from here. So this is the user ID. So if we fetch users, then we get the ID of the user and its corresponding name. And here I have user ID, but I don't have the name. And in this problem statement until here, the new array that we want to return, it must contain username. So we have solved several similar problems in the last sprint. So let's see a couple of ways of doing that. Okay. So first is we have already written a way to get all users and a way to get all to-dos. So we don't need to do it again, right? So I can, immediately use this. So basically, by the time this function is invoked and we reach line number 50, we can be sure that we will be having users and to-dos because of the await keyword. Okay, even though these returns promises, but we can be sure that by the time we reach here, we'll be having resolved users and resolved to-dos. Okay, in case nothing goes wrong. Now, forming new data is fairly simple for you, hopefully. So I can do something like let new data equals to to-dos dot map. Since to-dos have 5 items, I need 5 items returned. So map looks like a good option to me. I'll have each to-do item and I'll maybe form an object. And I'll return object in map, in dot map, whatever we return becomes the value of the new array. And here we can add like object dot user ID is equal to to-do dot user ID, object dot username. So we don't have any way to find name as of now, so I'll just put some empty value here for now. And object dot to do title can be to do dot title. Okay, I just prefer to check it once before moving ahead. So what I can do is from here I can return the new data. Okay, so I'll just return the new data and I'll uncomment this just to check things out. And we see that we have 5 objects and each object contains user ID. Name right now is empty string and to do title. So user ID is working, to do title is working, but we don't see the name yet. There are multiple ways of getting name. So here we have to-do.user-id, right? From user ID 6, we need the name. So for example, for user ID 6, the name would be so and so. Okay. So there are many ways to solve this. You can write a custom function that takes in an ID, iterates through it, any loop. You can use any loop to iterate. And when they find the proper name, a proper ID, they return the name. So you can use any loop, for of loop, or whatever loop you would like to use. One of the popular ways is using, again, sort of a hash map or a directory. So I'll create a users directory, and by the end, I'll get something like this. So I'll just console log it. I'll uncomment it so that I don't make too many requests. And I'll just console log users directory. Okay. And okay, I'll need to invoke it in order to get, so here I'll just remove return, and you can see that we have nice directory, user1, their name, user2, their name, user5, 6, their name. So it will be very easy for us to access it here. Okay. So now I have this nice data structure, right? Users directory. And I need to find out whatever the user ID is. For example, if the user ID is 6, I want to find the user ID of this particular iteration, right? This particular to do. So here I can access to do dot user ID. Okay. And now if I invoke this function again, I uncomment this, then I can see that now I have user ID, I have username and user title. So a part of the problem seems to be done, right? Let's move ahead. The property names, we have set it. The new data should be sorted by user ID in ascending order. So this is the last piece of the problem. We are solving the problem step by step. And the new data should be sorted by user ID in ascending order. So that should not be hard for us, right? So before returning the new data, I'll just sort it out. And now when I uncomment this, just to check my implementation, I'll see that, first user ID is 1, second is also 1, third is 6, fourth is 8, fifth is 10. So we have, we have solved everything that were asked in the problem statement. So yeah, this is the way you would solve it. You may expect a very similar problem in your evaluation. Your evaluation will not contain DOM things for now, because I am not very sure with, how this DOM testing, etc. works here in our coding platform. And also, you all, I think, did not get much practice of DOM in coding platform. So I don't want to give that as a part of evaluation this time. So this time you can expect this kind of a problem. It is a bit similar to what was given in the last evaluation. But last time, the data that you received was hard coded. This time you are fetching the data from a real backend server. So this is sort of the only difference this time. Okay. So your problem may contain this way, a couple of functions, and you might have to implement their functionality. Remember that async function always returns a promise. You don't need to do anything for that.